Capitol Hill now, Democrats there are calling for more oversight of the Supreme Court at a hearing on ethics reform. The Senate Judiciary Committee today has heard from witnesses, including constitutional experts and others. The panel's chairman, Democratic Senator Illinois Senator Dick Durbin, said the court needs higher ethical standards, enforceable ethical standards, especially after revelations that conservative Justice Clarence Thomas accepted lavish trips and gifts from a Texas billionaire who is a major GOP donor.
I think it's pretty clear to most objective people this is not the ordinary course of business, nor should it be a standard for those of us in public service. We wouldn't tolerate this from a city council member or an alderman. It falls short of ethical standards we expect of any public servant in America. And yet the Supreme Court won't even acknowledge it's a problem.
Well, meanwhile, the committee's ranking Republican member, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, he says he's portraying these hearings as an effort from Democrats to undermine the court's credibility.
This is an unseemly effort by the Democratic left to destroy the legitimacy of the Roberts Court. It's put people at risk. It's put their personal safety at risk. And if you want to talk about making the court a better institution, I'll be glad to work with you in that regard. If you want to talk about destroying the court, count me out.
Let's bring in ABC News senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer for more. Devin, we heard a lot of the partisan wrangling out there, and this is, however, increasingly an issue of concern, not just for senators and partisans, but for lay people when they hear that really there is no code of conduct governing the court. What were your biggest takeaways? I know you've been following this hearing. What did you hear?
A big takeaway, Terry, is the bipartisan agreement on the Senate Judiciary panel and what was otherwise a very politicized hearing, that there does need to be more transparency and maybe even some clearer rules for the Supreme Court. Those were the words of Lindsey Graham. He was critical of how this hearing came about, but he agreed that there does need to be more transparency. So did the senior Republican Chuck Grassley of Iowa. He said there needs to be more oversight. Both of those men sort of giving a nod to the public concern that's out there, which you talked about, and we see it in the polling data. But there was big disagreement in this hearing over how you get there. Concern about separation of powers, concern about whether Congress even has the ability to set rules and impose them on the Supreme Court. Here was the take of Amanda Frost. She was one of the academics, professors, who was weighing in on that question. Take a listen.
I think the framers of the Constitution realized how important it was to have a judiciary that was insulated, that its decisions were insulated from political pressure. But equally, the framers realized that they would want Congress to play a role in the establishment of the courts, the lower courts, which are the Congress's choice to create them, and the Supreme Court, which must exist but does not control most aspects of its administration, like its size, like the quorum requirements, like when it meets. Even significant aspects of its jurisdiction are controlled by Congress, as the framers intended.
So it's a balancing act, as you know well, Terry. The Constitution doesn't say a lot in Article 3 about the Supreme Court, how it's made up, what the rules are. It just simply says there will be one, and leaves a lot of this regulation to Congress. Now there's a debate how much power Congress has over another branch of government. So a very academic conversation, but a serious conversation for the country, as there's a lot of concern now about how these justices are held to account.
Well, let me follow up on that last point on the constitutional issue here. Congress can pass laws governing lower court judges because they create those judgeships in law. But the Constitution itself says there shall be a Supreme Court. And so I guess the justices feel they can't be governed by Congress's dictates. You know, Chief Justice John Roberts didn't even show up at this hearing. How do you read what can be done here? Are you hearing anything about the possibilities for Congress to act or for the court to act on its own more robustly in this area?
Well, there's a lot of debate over the question, Terry, of whether Congress can force the Supreme Court, and who would enforce the rules. That's the big question, an objection from Chief Justice John Roberts. These are 9 justices. They are appointed by presidents, confirmed by the Senate. You see a letter that he sent today to Chairman Dick Durbin declining to appear, but outlining what he says are already robust ethic guidelines that the justices do follow. Having spoken to a number of the justices, Terry, I am very well aware that they believe they do follow rules. They hold themselves to high ethical standards, but there's no one that oversees that. There's no one that polices that. That's what Democrats say needs to be imposed. But Republicans today, Terry, said it's not only unnecessary, it's unconstitutional. And so they framed this hearing very much as a political charade, one that is a bit of sour grapes, if you will, because so many of the current court justices were appointed by Republicans.
Right. The behavior of justices, you know, has exceeded what one might consider to be ethical guidelines on both sides of the aisle over the years. Congress taking a look at it now, and I know you're there for us. Thanks very much, Devin Dwyer.
Thanks, sir.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.